Imagine standing at the base of the two most iconic mountains in the world. On one side, you have Mount Everest, towering, majestic, and known to many as the ultimate peak to conquer. On the other side, there's Denali, a rugged, frozen giant, lurking in the harsh wilderness of Alaska. But here's the twist. While Everest is the tallest mountain on Earth, some climbers claim that Denali is far more dangerous. So which one is truly the greater challenge? Today, we're diving deep into the battle of Denali versus Mount Everest. We'll explore their towering heights, the deadly weather that's claimed lives, and the real-life tragedies that have unfolded on their slopes. From the infamous 1996 Everest disaster to Denali's 1967 tragedy that wiped out an entire climbing team, these mountains have more stories of survival and loss than you might imagine. But the question remains, if you had to choose one, which mountain would push you to your absolute limit? Stay tuned to find out. When it comes to towering mountains that capture the imagination, few names are as iconic as Mount Everest and Denali. But while both mountains are celebrated for their extreme heights and challenges, their histories and significance are very different. Let's start with Mount Everest, the highest point on Earth, standing at a jaw-dropping 8,848 meters. Everest's fame exploded after Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay made the first successful ascent in 1953. That climb is forever etched into history, marking Everest as the ultimate symbol of human achievement. Since then, the mountain has become a dream destination for adventurers from all around the world. But with that dream comes a very real cost. The 1996 Everest disaster brought the risks to mainstream attention. That year, multiple climbers were caught in a deadly storm high up on the mountain, resulting in 8 tragic deaths. This harrowing event was later immortalized in Jon Krakauer's Into Thin Air and left a permanent mark on how the world views Everest's dangers. Now shifting to Denali, which may not have the global recognition of Everest, but its towering presence at 6,190 meters, or 20,310 feet, makes it the highest peak in North America. Originally called Mount McKinley, Denali is the centerpiece of Alaskan wilderness and holds deep significance for the indigenous people who have lived near it for centuries. The mountain's first recorded successful ascent came in 1913, led by Hudson Stuck, an Episcopal archdeacon, and his team. But what really sets Denali apart is its remoteness and raw, untamed nature. It's not as commercialized or crowded as Everest, but the isolation and harsh conditions make it a serious challenge even for experienced climbers. One of Denali's most mysterious and tragic stories is that of Naomi Wamura, a Japanese mountaineer who made a solo ascent in 1984 but disappeared on his descent. Wamura's disappearance added an air of mystique to Denali, cementing its reputation as one of the most dangerous and isolated peaks to climb. But here's a fact that might surprise you. While Denali is shorter than Everest, its base-to-peak rise is actually greater. Because Denali starts from a lower base and rises dramatically out of the Alaskan landscape, climbers on Denali face more vertical ascent than those on Everest. This, combined with its extreme weather and isolation, gives Denali its own unique place in mountaineering history. Both mountains have earned their place in the annals of climbing, but while Everest is globally famous for its height and long history of triumph and tragedy, Denali holds its own with rugged isolation and an equally daunting set of challenges. When it comes to altitude, Mount Everest is in a league of its own. Standing at 29,029 feet, the air up there is so thin that climbers who venture above 8,000 meters enter what is infamously known as the death zone. Here, oxygen levels are only a third of what they are at sea level, making every breath a challenge. Most climbers require supplemental oxygen just to survive, and even then, the effects of altitude can be deadly. Take the tragic case of Rob Hall, a highly experienced mountaineer who died in the death zone during the 1996 Everest disaster. Caught in a brutal storm just below the summit, Hall succumbed to exhaustion and oxygen deprivation. Despite being in radio contact with base camp, help couldn't reach him in time, and his body remains near the summit to this day. One of the many grim reminders of Everest's altitude dangers. But altitude isn't only about oxygen. At these heights, your body begins to shut down. Blood thickens, your brain swells, and you become prone to altitude sickness and cerebral edema, both life-threatening conditions. This is where Everest claims many of its victims, making the mountain's extreme height one of its deadliest features. Now Denali may not reach the staggering height of Everest, standing at only 20,310 feet, but don't let that fool you. Because of Denali's position close to the Arctic Circle, climbers experience the same low oxygen effects at a much lower altitude. In fact, many compare climbing Denali to climbing a 7,000-meter peak elsewhere in the world. A prime example of Denali's altitude dangers came in the 1967 Denali tragedy, where a group of climbers led by Joe Wilcox were caught in a violent storm at high altitude. 7 climbers perished in the storm, largely due to a combination of low oxygen, exhaustion, and exposure. Even though Denali's altitude is lower than Everest's, the physical and mental toll can be just as severe, especially when combined with the harsh weather conditions. Climbers on Denali also don't use supplemental oxygen, meaning they have to fully acclimatize to the mountain's height. This self-reliance adds a layer of difficulty that many overlook when comparing it to Everest. And while Denali doesn't have a formal death zone, its atmosphere can be just as unforgiving. Climbers often say that Denali feels like it's higher than it actually is, thanks to the low pressure at the higher latitudes. So, while Everest's towering height and death zone are undeniably terrifying, Denali's altitude challenges shouldn't be underestimated either. Both mountains demand respect, and both can turn deadly when climbers misjudge their ability to cope with the thin air. When it comes to climate and weather, both Denali and Everest are notorious for their extreme conditions, but they challenge climbers in very different ways. Let's dive into what makes each mountain so unpredictable and deadly. Mount Everest is infamous for its sudden, deadly weather changes. At the top of the world, climbers face temperatures as low as -60 degrees Fahrenheit or -51 degrees Celsius, and wind speeds reaching over 100 miles per hour. Even in the best conditions, climbers are exposed to incredibly thin air, where altitude sickness becomes a constant threat. One of the deadliest aspects of Everest's climate is how quickly storms can appear. In 2014, an ice avalanche killed 16 Sherpas in the Khumbu Icefall, an area notorious for its shifting ice. This event wasn't caused by a storm, but rather the natural instability of Everest's glacier system. Still, the dangerous weather and conditions on the mountain make even short periods of exposure life-threatening. A more recent example of Everest's deadly weather came in 2019 when overcrowding and poor conditions led to a tragic series of deaths. As climbers waited in long queues near the summit, they were forced to remain in the so-called death zone for too long, an area above 8,000 meters where the human body starts to shut down due to lack of oxygen. Several climbers perished after being exposed to the harsh conditions for extended periods, showing how Everest's unpredictable weather and the sheer altitude can create a deadly combination. Climbing window is narrow, with most expeditions attempting their summit bids in May or October, when the weather is slightly more stable. Even then, climbers know they're gambling with their lives. On the other hand, Denali, located in Alaska near the Arctic Circle, is all about freezing temperatures and relentless storms. While Denali's summit is lower than Everest's, the cold can be even more severe, with temperatures dropping as low as -148 degrees Fahrenheit or -100 degrees Celsius. Climbers here face brutal conditions that are often considered worse than Everest's in terms of cold and isolation. One of the most famous examples of Denali's unforgiving weather occurred in 1967 during what is now known as the Denali tragedy. 7 climbers from Joe Wilcox's team lost their lives in a storm that swept over the mountain unexpectedly. Despite their experience and preparation, they were no match for the ferocity of Denali's weather, which trapped them in a snowstorm for days. This story serves as a stark reminder that Denali's isolation and extreme weather can be just as fatal as Everest's altitude challenges. Denali's weather isn't just cold, it's highly unpredictable. Climbers can be trapped for days in snow caves, waiting for storms to pass. Art Davidson's 1967 winter ascent team is a prime example of this. They survived one of the coldest temperatures ever recorded on the mountain, minus 148 degrees Fahrenheit. Even with the right gear and planning, Denali's climate is often a life-or-death struggle, making it a mountain where self-sufficiency and endurance are just as crucial as technical skill. While Everest's altitude and storms create massive risks, Denali's cold, heavy snowfall and isolation challenge climbers in a completely different way. On Everest, a climber's window of opportunity is dictated by weather breaks in the spring and fall, but on Denali, a climber could be pinned down by a storm for over a week, with no rescue in sight. So, which mountain poses the bigger weather challenge? That depends on whether you prefer battling thin air and sudden storms, or facing freezing cold and endless isolation. When it comes to the terrain and technical challenges, both Denali and Everest present climbers with unique obstacles, each with its own set of dangers. Let's start with Mount Everest. The most iconic feature of Everest's terrain is the Khumbu Icefall, a treacherous section filled with towering seracs, deep crevasses, and moving ice. Climbers must navigate this chaotic landscape, relying on fixed ropes and ladders to cross yawning gaps. The dangers here are immense. Just in 2014, an avalanche swept through the icefall, tragically killing 16 Sherpas. This incident serves as a stark reminder that even the lower slopes of Everest can be deadly due to shifting ice and unpredictable weather. Then there's the Hillary Step, a nearly vertical rock face just below the summit. Climbing this section requires technical skill and sheer determination. It's where many climbers face bottlenecks during their ascent, increasing their exposure to the harsh conditions of the death zone. The risks are heightened by fatigue and the thin air, which makes every step an arduous task. In 2017, renowned climber Uli Steck tragically lost his life while acclimatizing for a solo ascent of Everest's West Ridge, illustrating that even experienced climbers can fall victim to the mountain's challenges. Now, shifting our focus to Denali. While Denali may be lower than Everest, its rugged terrain presents formidable challenges. The mountain features vast glaciers, steep ascents, and treacherous conditions. Climbers often tackle the West Buttress route, which includes a steep headwall that requires advanced climbing skills. Here, climbers encounter crevasses that can swallow a person whole, making careful navigation essential. In 2017, an avalanche near the base camp claimed the lives of 2 climbers, underscoring the unpredictable nature of Denali's weather and terrain. One of the most daunting aspects of Denali is the self-sufficiency required for climbers. Unlike Everest, where climbers often rely on Sherpas for support, those tackling Denali must carry heavy packs filled with their gear and supplies. This not only tests their physical endurance, but also their mental fortitude. The combination of harsh weather, steep terrain, and the need for self-reliance can make Denali feel like a more isolated and challenging climb. In summary, while Everest is known for its infamous icefall and bottlenecks near the summit, Denali challenges climbers with its extreme cold, steep ascents and the necessity for independence. Both mountains test the limits of human endurance, but in different ways that reveal the unique beauty and terror of high-altitude climbing. When it comes to climbing season and logistics, Mount Everest and Denali could not be more different, reflecting their unique challenges and climates. Everest's climbing season typically runs from late April to early June. This narrow window is crucial for climbers, as they must take advantage of the brief period when the weather is relatively stable and the jet stream shifts away from the mountain. However, this limited time frame leads to overcrowding on the popular routes, particularly the South Col route. Picture this. In May 2019, climbers faced dangerous traffic jams at the summit, waiting for hours in the death zone. Tragically, Several climbers lost their lives during this time due to exposure and exhaustion, underscoring the peril of such crowded conditions. In contrast, Denali's climbing season runs from late May to early July, but this doesn't guarantee a smooth ascent. Denali is notorious for its unpredictable weather, with storms that can blow in at any moment. Climbers often face harsh conditions, including sub-zero temperatures and strong winds, making it a test of endurance. In 1967, a team led by Art Davidson survived a winter ascent in -148 degrees Fahrenheit or -100 degrees Celsius temperatures, showcasing the extreme conditions climbers can encounter. Logistics play a vital role in both mountains, but in starkly different ways. On Everest, climbers often rely heavily on Sherpas for support. These skilled climbers carry supplies, set up camps, and help manage the logistics of the expedition. This commercialization has made Everest accessible to many, allowing climbers of varying experience levels to attempt the summit. However, this can also lead to inexperienced climbers tackling dangerous sections of the mountain, contributing to the risks involved. On the other hand, Denali climbers must be more self-sufficient. Due to its remote location, there are fewer support teams and no Sherpas. Climbers are required to haul their gear, set up their own camps, and often carry supplies for longer periods. The need for self-reliance adds to the challenge and isolation of Denali. A vivid example of this was the tragic 2017 avalanche that struck near Denali's base camp, taking the lives of 2 climbers. Unlike Everest, where help can be mobilized quickly in some cases, the remoteness of Denali means that rescue operations can be extremely difficult, if not impossible, during severe weather. So, whether it's the crowded commercialized routes of Everest or the rugged independent climbs of Denali, both mountains offer unique logistical challenges that can make or break an expedition. The decision on where to climb often comes down to the climber's experience, resources, and willingness to face the specific risks each mountain presents. When it comes to climbing, risk is an unavoidable reality, and both Denali and Everest come with their own deadly reputations. But which mountain is truly more dangerous? Let's start with Everest. Known as the roof of the world, this majestic peak stands at almost 9,000 meters. However, it's not just the height that makes it perilous. Once climbers reach 8,000 meters, they enter the infamous death zone, where oxygen levels drop dangerously low. Here, every breath feels like a struggle, and the body starts to shut down. One haunting example of this is the story of David Sharp, a climber who attempted a solo ascent in 2006. Sharp ran out of oxygen and collapsed in the death zone. Tragically, over 40 climbers passed him on their way to the summit, but no one could help him. His death highlighted the cold, harsh reality of Everest. In that extreme altitude, the will to summit can overshadow the instinct to save a fellow climber. But Everest isn't just about individual tragedies. The mountain has seen its share of disasters. Take the 1996 Everest disaster, for instance. A fierce storm struck while climbers were at the summit, resulting in 8 deaths in a single day. Now, let's turn our attention to Denali. While it's lower in height, standing at over 6,000 meters, Denali is no less deadly. In fact, its fatality rate is surprisingly higher than that of Everest. Why? Because Denali poses a different set of challenges that can be equally, if not more, treacherous. One of the most harrowing incidents occurred in 1967 when a team of 7 climbers led by Joe Wilcox perished in an unexpected storm. They had summited, but as they descended, brutal weather conditions set in. The relentless cold and heavy snow forced them into their tents for shelter, but it quickly became a tomb. This tragedy serves as a stark reminder that Denali's unpredictable weather can turn deadly in an instant, often without warning. Another tragic story is that of an Alaskan army crew who crashed on Denali in 1947. Although they survived the crash, the freezing temperatures and harsh environment proved too much. In a desperate attempt to survive, they succumbed to the elements before rescuers could reach them. This incident illustrates that even non-climbers venturing near Denali face severe risks from its unforgiving climate. In summary, while Everest is notorious for its extreme altitude and the challenges of the death zone, Denali's higher fatality rate highlights that altitude isn't the only measure of danger. The treacherous weather, isolation, and harsh conditions of Denali make it equally perilous, if not more so, for those who dare to conquer it. So, which mountain is more dangerous? It seems that both Everest and Denali carry their own unique risks. As climbers face these challenges, they must weigh their limits and prepare for the unexpected. When it comes to the type of climbers who attempt to conquer Denali and Everest, there's a striking difference in experience levels and motivations. When it comes to the type of climbers who attempt to conquer Denali and Everest, there's a striking difference in experience levels and motivations. Let's start with Everest, often dubbed the ultimate climb. Over the years, it has transformed into a commercialized venture. Every spring, the mountain becomes a bustling hub of climbers, many of whom are less experienced. They come with dreams of standing atop the world's highest peak, but often lack the necessary skills for such a perilous ascent. With prices for guided expeditions ranging from $35,000 to over $100,000, climbers are willing to pay a hefty price, often thinking that financial investment equates to safety. In stark contrast, Denali attracts a different breed of climber. Those who tackle this formidable mountain tend to be more seasoned adventurers, often with extensive climbing backgrounds. While Denali is less known internationally, it draws climbers seeking solitude, self-reliance, and a true wilderness experience. Climbers must be prepared to manage all aspects of the expedition on their own. Unlike Everest, there are no Sherpas to carry loads or set fixed lines. For instance, in 2015, climber Lonnie Dupre made history with his solo winter ascent of Denali. This achievement required not only immense physical strength, but also profound survival skills in the face of extreme cold and unpredictable weather. In terms of cost, climbing Denali is generally more affordable than Everest. A typical guided expedition to Denali might range from $7,000 to $15,000, which reflects the mountain's less commercialized nature. However, climbers must be ready to carry heavy packs, often exceeding 100 pounds, for days on end. This demands not only physical endurance, but also a wealth of climbing knowledge and experience. So, which mountain calls to you? As we ponder this question, consider the experiences of climbers like Lakpa Sherpa, who has summited Everest 10 times. He describes the mountain as like a dream, but he has also tragically lost friends to its harsh realities. On the other hand, there's Lonnie Dupre, who achieved a remarkable solo winter ascent of Denali after multiple attempts, showcasing the grit and determination required to conquer its icy slopes. In the end, both peaks demand respect and preparation. Whether you find yourself battling Everest's thin air or Denali's freezing temperatures, each mountain offers a distinct and daunting challenge. So, which would you choose? Would you rather face Everest's thin air and crowded paths, or brave Denali's freezing winds and solitude? The choice is yours, but remember, both mountains come with their own set of risks that could change your life forever. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for joining me on this thrilling journey comparing these two iconic peaks. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible adventures in the world of climbing and exploration.